So we know with virtualization that it's possible to run a different kind of operating system on your host machine, but is it possible to do something similar with an application? Well, we'll find out here in a moment. Hi everybody, welcome to StudioSec. Thank you for watching. Like if this video is helpful, comment down below. If you're learning something about containerization, if that's been helpful for you, maybe comment that down. Maybe that's helpful for others as well. And subscribe for more content I'm posting every week. Now, here's a link to my video on virtualization, and that's important because that's going to kind of give you an idea on how that works, and that'll give you a basis for what we're talking about here with containerization, because they're kind of built on the same thing. But kind of as a summary, virtualization isolates running basically an entire operating system. It gives it all the libraries and dependencies and a kernel, and it gives it access to the hardware on your computer, and it allows those to run independent of one another, right? So if you're running like on a laptop that has plenty of beef on it, right? So if you're running on just like a desktop that might have, all kinds of hardware on it, then you can use, your host operating system to kind of act as a hypervisor, and you can run multiple virtual machines on that. Or if you're running like a server, a large, beefy, racked machine, you can put hundreds of virtual machines on there, right? You could deploy instantly, entire work environment pretty much from there, right? So that's what virtualization gives you. It gives you the ability to scale. It gives you the ability to deploy, several different operating systems that can allow you to do more than just, what your hypervisor, or your host operating system can do. It can really kind of unlock what you're able to do from a technical standpoint because you have the resources of that new operating system. Now, you can also do something similarly in an application level. It's not quite the same. It basically what we're doing here is we're adding everything that the app needs to run, and then we're also including its binaries and libraries into its own container, and that is basically running on the containerization engine. We'll talk about what that is here in just a moment, which is running, of course, on your operating system. Now, the reason we're comparing this to virtualization is because, obviously, your virtual machine, it has its own, libraries and dependencies and stuff, but it also is running on its own virtual operating system, and that's on the hypervisor, which is running on the operating system. So, let's say, you're wanting to deploy an app very quickly, right? So you set up a virtual machine that's capable of running multiple apps on it, right? Now that virtual machine, let's say, that obviously we see that is, running through a hypervisor, then through the host OS, and then it has access to the hardware, right? But, so there's a few steps there for it to get through before it can have access to the hardware, which can kind of slow the application down a little bit. So if you want to take away, let's say the guest operating system, right? The virtual machine operating system, we want to take that layer away, right? And we want, the virtual machine to just run the app. It does not run anything else that it takes to be a virtual machine. That's effectively a container, right? That is effectively a container. In fact, that quite literally, according to this graph that we're showing on the screen, is a container, right? So what that allows you to do is you can scale applications just like you can scale virtual machines, right? You can cluster applications just like you can cluster virtual machines. It kind of unlocks Pandora's box from a scaling perspective on what you can do with an application. So mind you, the application can run just about exactly the same as a normal application, right? But it is scalable. So you can basically, that container is running off of what's called a container image, right? Those container images can be created, or they can be pulled from what's called like an image repository, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. So you pull the image, you create the container, and then if you want to create a cluster, you can build multiple containers running the exact same app, right? And then you can scale it. You can multiply, so you can create copies of that container or that cluster and expand it so it can take on increasing, amounts of usage from more people. So if you're a large organization and you have an application you're wanting to scale throughout the organization, this is a great option to go. Now, of course, let's talk about the containerization engine, right? And so what the containerization engine is that something like Docker, right? And Docker is kind of the main example of what a containerization engine is. Now there are others, but that's kind of, Docker is kind of the go-to, right? That allows you to pull, containers from a repository, and then it helps the container to communicate with the operating system, right? And that allows your containers to run. So you can do that with a containerization engine. Now, I also mentioned you can run it in a cluster. Now that can be done with Docker, but that is mostly in the industry being done with what's called Kubernetes. And Kubernetes is a container clustering service that allows you to create clusters of containers. I mean, it's pretty much that simple, but you can do all kinds of other things with it. You can expand it, you can scale it, you can knock some down. You can pretty much do anything you want to do, like with Docker, but you're doing it with Kubernetes. Now, I mentioned also, there are images and there are image repositories, right? So like Docker, for instance, has its own image repository. It's kind of, think of like GitHub, right? So you can go to GitHub, you can download a program and you can run it. Well, it's similar on like Docker. They have a list of applications that you can get, and you can download that application and run it containerized using the Docker service. You can also use that in Kubernetes, but mind you, in the newer version of Kubernetes, as of the moment that this video is being published, that is February 2021, you are going to see less, Kubernetes is not going to be working with Docker as much. It's, Docker will not be, the main source of images for Kubernetes. It'll still work, but, it's not going to be, the main source of images there. Now, if you're probably thinking of different deployments, yes, you can run Docker on just about every major OS, including Mac, Linux, and Windows, but you can also run Kubernetes, out there. And Kubernetes is also, that runs on all the major cloud providers. So if you think about like Amazon Web Service or Azure, they have their own Kubernetes integrations available. Now with that, that's basically containerization in a nutshell. It's pretty simple, pretty easy to understand, but if you have any questions about it, comment down below. I would be more than happy to help clarify. Like if this video was helpful, and subscribe for more content I'm posting every week. Thank you.